In today's episode, I'm going to talk about all things colour, how to mix colour, getting that buttery feel of colour, how to avoid getting your painting looking like it's chalky. Good day, everyone, and welcome to this creative episode. Thank you all for joining me. Absolute pleasure to be here with you today. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about all things colour, how to mix colour, getting that buttery feel of colour, how to avoid getting your painting looking like it's chalky. At least this is what I do in my studio. So hopefully, if these are the nuggets that resonate with you, you can take them away and give them a go when you're painting your next painting. So let's get going and let me show you what I do, my process of mixing color. A side note, everybody, there's technical terms for everything. But get ready to hear the most sophisticated technical descriptions in this video, which you might not have heard before, but please don't write in. But anyway, the words that are going to be technical are going to be dab, smidge, plonk, a tad, a spot, a dot. These are, of course, my words, but I'll show you all the appropriate amounts that I'll be mixing and the colors that I'll be mixing, so you've got that idea. But just so you know, they're the most sophisticated technical terms that you'll hear in this video. So let's get to it. Okay, so for this demo, as you've already gathered, I'm going to paint a still life, which is going to be those purple agapanthus that you saw me collect at the beginning of the video. So I've got here a French ultramarine. This is a phthalo blue lake and a Prussian blue on this side. I had to just read that one quickly. So ultramarine, a phthalo blue lake, and a Prussian blue. So it's really important, at least when I start to paint a painting that's monochromatic, and in this case, the still life is all purple in the leaves, in the actual the flowers that I'm painting. I tend to have a variety of blues, at least one warm. Ultramarine blue is considered a warm tone. Phthalo blue lake is considered a cool blue, and I've got an additional, the Prussian blue. So I'm going to show you how I achieve that depth of blue without my painting coming out chalky. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to mix all of these with a white to one side and then show you how I get that depth of color on the other side. I'm going to do my best to work around the camera, so if it does bump in there, it's just my arm. So here's the ultramarine blue. I'm going to take that blue here, and notice when I say here's my small dab, and there's the dab in relation to the blue that I've put on there. So here's what it looks like on the tip of my palette knife. So it's not a lot of white. I'm going to do that for all the blues to show you how they behave when you add white to them. So ultramarine tends to have more of or leans more towards a purple, and you'll see what I mean in a moment. There's ultramarine blue. Now I'm going to add the same amount to the phthalo blue lake. Now this is a highly pigmented blue. So I'm going to add the same amount of white that you saw me add to the ultramarine, but this time we're going to the the phthalo blue lake. My apologies. There's a lot of P's in this on these blues. So let me add that white in the phthalo, and you'll see just how pigmented that is. And you would need to add a lot of white in order to lighten this particular blue. Okay, so that's ultramarine. Now we're going to add the Prussian blue again. Here's the blue there, and same amount of white. Again, there's that dab of white, and I'll add that to the Prussian blue. And again, you can see the difference in their color tone. Okay, now what does that look like when I add these on my actual canvas? Let's have a look at that. Okay, so here is the ultramarine, and we'll just add that to the side up here. Now just remember, these were I've lightened these blues just using white. There's the phthalo blue lake. You can see just how intense that blue is. And then this one is the Prussian blue right underneath. There we go. So notice the difference in the blues by using 3 different blues. If I was to go and add further white to these, this is where I now add into the problem of getting them into that chalky, washed out feel. Let me do that for you so you can see the difference as you start to mix color. So let's say that we now want to further lighten these color tones that we've mixed up here. So we're not going to dip into more of the blue, but we're going to lighten up this particular tone up here. So if I was to add the same amount of just a dab of white to this blue here, okay, so we're lightening up this particular color tone. There it is there. And now let's do the same for the other ones as well. And we'll add a little bit more white in here. And a little bit more white, same amount into the Prussian blue. Okay, so let's have a look at what these color tones now look like against the original one that we just did where we first started adding the white. Okay, so let's start with the French Ultra, and we're going to just add that across. Okay. There's the French Ultra. There's the phthalo blue lake. And this is the Prussian blue. Okay. So see how now they've started to lose their depth of color. They've gone more into that white chalky, whilst they're maintaining the color tone, and that's primarily because they've got a good pigment, particularly the phthalo blue lake has got a very strong pigment that will sustain its color tone. But the more white you add in the rest, particularly colors that are not as strong, they tend to then become washed out. So every time you add that dab, a small plonk of white within the original, you'll start to lose the depth of that chroma and it will start to become washed out. Now, how do you remedy that? How do you prevent all that depth to not lose itself and to still maintain that buttery vibrance, that real soft feel, that velvety look that a color can have? Well, now we start to look at what else we can add in order to maintain the strength of that chroma. I just want to do another third stage of adding white, again, just to show you how the blues change before I jump onto the next stage. But let me start again with the dab of white into all these different color of blue, and then we can have a look to see exactly what I mean about that washed out look. Again, maintain that same dab in every section that we started. So this is now the Phthalo Lake. And let's go to the Prussian blue, same amount of dab, and keep on adding that. And the problem that you run into when you only use white is that eventually, I mean, this might look okay, but eventually as you start to paint the rest of your painting, that whole washed out chalky look will come through your entire composition. And that's why it's important to understand what colors you're mixing on your palette board before you start to paint it on your canvas. So let's have a look at this third time that we added white and what that looks like against all the others that we already done. Okay, so here's the first stage of white, more white when we added it to the same blues, and now we're going to do a third column there. So here's the ultramarine blue. Here's the Phthalo Blue Lake and the Prussian blue. Okay. So you can see the further white that you add into the ultramarine, it starts to lose its actual chroma. It's starting to lose that velvety, purple-esque almost tone that we started off at the beginning. The Phthalo still maintains its chroma, and that's purely because it's such a strong pigment. And this particular color is from Michael Harding. So he does amazing natural pigments with all his oil paint, which is why it's such a good strength. The Prussian blue starts to also lose its chroma the more white we start to add to it. Like I said, when you're painting a whole painting, then if you're only adding or lightening your color tones using white, you will get that washed out look eventually within your whole artwork. And you want to avoid that, when you're painting sunlight, for example, or sunshine coming through clouds, you want to know how to add warmth within your cloud, not just lightening up using white, because again, that's going to give you that chalky, washed out feel. Okay, so I'm going to start all over again and remix the Ultra, Phthalo, and Prussian from the beginning. So there's all my initial dabs and the dabs of white beside them. So the reason for that is now I'm going to show you how I maintain that warmth. I think I chose the wrong one in here. I didn't put the Ultra. I used something else. Okay, let's just go back, and here's the Ultra Blue and a dab of, yeah, that's better, of white. Okay. So we're going to start off from the beginning, and we've added in our white. Again, there's the Phthalo and the Prussian. So if I'm continuing to add white to these, as I've shown you before, it's just going to get chalky and chalkier. But if I'm adding a dab and a small nibble, a pinprick of permanent magenta. So you can see that on my palette, it's very, very small. What I'm doing here is that I'm maintaining the chroma of each a separate color. So the more I add white, the more it will become washed out. By adding a dab of that permanent magenta, it is yet permanent magenta that I picked up, then I'm not altering its chroma too much. Notice how it's become a lot more purple, right? Now, let me add a little bit more of that permanent magenta. Again, another little nibble. There we go. Into the Phthalo Blue Lake. one for the Prussian blue as well. There we go. All I've really done here is add more chroma, more depth, that buttery feel to the actual color. And let's have a look again what that will look like as compared to what we put up initially on our canvas. Okay, so here's the ultramarine with that dab of permanent magenta. Okay, here's the phthalo blue lake. Remember that was a really small dab of that permanent in there. And the Prussian blue. Can you notice the difference between this and this color tone? This color tone, which is the ultramarine, it's got white and a dab of permanent magenta, and this ultramarine has only got white. I'm hoping that my camera can pick up the subtleties, but this is a lot more richer in its color than this ultramarine. You might be able to see in the phthalo blue lake, again, just the depth of that blue in comparison to this one here. Same thing with the Prussian blue on either side. So by adding a small dab of a cool red, which permanent magenta is for me, then that maintains that chroma. Now imagine I'd want to paint distant blue hills. That tone here, or this tone here, would lend itself so much better because you're now pushing the color back, so that cool purple would come through far better. If I wanted to bring in that in the foreground, then I would add a dab of a cadmium red, because cadmium is a warm color, and that would signify that that was in the foreground or closer to us versus at a distance. So when I want to add a lot more warmth to my tone, eliminating the white or keeping it as low as possible is the key. Because as you can see here, by adding a dab of that red, it's able to intensify that particular color tone in ultramarine, phthalo, and Prussian. Let's go to the next level and lighten it up further as we did in this column, and show you again the difference of how that chroma stays intact in comparison with just lightening it up with white. Okay, so same process what we did before. Let's add white and a dab of the permanent magenta and maintain the depth and that velvety feel of these colors. So we're going to add, here's the first dab of white there, and the next dab, and the next dab there. So we've added equal portions to these colors. And now we're going to add a small, notice I'm going to place it next to the white so you can see, and one there. These are really, really small increments of color adjustments that we make. And that's what's necessary to do when we paint something. I know a lot of people want to rush this process and look like they're just slapping color, but unless you get this right here, then when you start to paint, it will start to look out of place. It just won't make sense. As I've mentioned in all my other videos, it's always important to measure what you mix here against what you've done on your canvas board, because that will give you the indication of whether the color tone is right or not. Okay, so let's continue on. Okay, so let's go now and compare what we've done and mixed here with that tiny dab of permanent magenta, and measure what this second stage looks like in lightening it up with white and permanent magenta versus just with the white. Okay, so here is the ultramarine. Phthalo blue lake, and Prussian blue. Okay, so there's a clear difference and visible difference between just having white and adding white and a dab of permanent magenta. So you can notice that the chroma is maintained, the color depth is maintained in the second stage of lightening up the colors, the ultramarine, phthalo blue, and Prussian blue. There's a very, very clear visibility between this row and this row here. Again, just as a reminder, this was only with white, and this is with white and permanent magenta. So maintaining that chroma is really important, and understanding what to add in your blues in order to maintain the color tone and not have your painting look washed out. Let's go to the third stage. So we've got a now clear comparison to what we did up here in the lightening up process by adding white and permanent magenta in this column up here. Okay, so let's go to the third stage of lightening up the color tones. There's white for every section, the same dab that we've put in every color tone. And now let's add that little plonk of red for every color in there. Okay, so let's mix our ultramarine. Okay, here's our phthalo blue lake and our Prussian blue. Make sure that you do clean your palette knives really well, otherwise you will cross-contaminate your color values, and that can be a bit of a, I mean, if you want to do that, that's fine, but it can be a bit of a nuisance trying to get that pure color tone. Okay, so let's have a look at what these now look at, which is our third stage of lightening process on the canvas. Okay, here is our French Ultra, Hello Blue Lake, and Prussian Blue. And there's a clear visibility. You can tell just how much of a difference it is by adding that permanent magenta as you're lightening up every stage. This is now, should be quite evident, just that whenever you add white, if you add too much white, it's simply going to be way too chalky. Every time I've added white and a dab of that red in there, it's maintained the chroma of every blue that I've put on the canvas. And if you've got a really tight, close coloured subject that you want to paint, maintaining this capability of changing your colour tones subtly is the key. And this particularly comes in really, really handy when you're painting portraits, or even when you're doing flowers that have got quite a tight value system from the shadows, reflective shadows, highlights, shadow tones, etc. Knowing how to lighten each stage without getting chalky feel in your artwork, just like this here, is the key. So I hope I've highlighted a little bit more of the ideology, how to get lighter in your color values without making them look washed out. The key is to add a dab of one of the primaries in order to maintain the color values. Now you might ask yourself, why did I add permanent magenta? Well, because I'm wanting to keep the purple value, because the flowers that I'm painting, as you saw, were in the purple color family. If they were green, then I would add a dab of yellow to maintain the chroma of that green. So I hope that makes sense. If I added only white to that green, again, it will make it incredibly washed out. So that's the reason why I use permanent magenta. It's because I'm wanting to keep the color value in the family of that purple color tone, which is what the flowers that I'm painting are. So every time you mix a new color tone, my suggestion would be to take your time mixing that color on your board. There is no reason to rush when you're mixing a new color tone, thinking that you have to paint fast and then not getting it right on the actual canvas that you paint on. Speed will come with experience, and then you'll just simply know what to add in every stage of your color mixing process. For me, the number one key has been to simply learn how to mix from primary colors. You can go and get tubes and tubes of different paints and different colors. At the end, they will not help you understand how to paint and where to actually add specific color tones. What I started to realize early on is that you need to have a warm color palette and a cool color palette, but only primaries. So a warm red, warm blue, a cool blue, warm yellow, and a cool yellow. And from that point, you can then start to mix whatever color you desire. Once you understand the power of mixing your own color tone, it's an unstoppable process. But my recommendation in first and foremost is get that right on your palette using your palette knife or brush, whichever suits you best, and then start to compare every single new note that you mix on your board, and then you will have an idea whether or not you need to go warmer, cooler, lighter, darker. That's my whole process that rambles through my head every time I mix a color. I don't think about whether or not it looks like it, whatever it may be. I simply start to focus on shapes, cool, warm, and then go from there. The other aspect of mixing your own color tones that I probably should mention is the type of white that you use. There are also cool and warm whites. That's the other aspect of learning how to mix color, and they help enormously as well. So that's the other point that you need to be mindful of when you're starting the process of painting, is understanding what colors you are actually using, whether they fall into the warm or the cool color tones. Generally, your cadmiums tend to be warm, and anything outside of that, they probably go and lend themselves a bit more into the cool side. I won't ramble all the blues, reds, and yellows because there are a number of them, but just be mindful of that process. Then, if you really want to dive even deeper, it's understanding the numbering or markings of all the colors. You've got series 1, 2, 3, and 4. Again, that's just the strength of the pigment within each of the paints. And that's the other thing you need to consider, because if you're buying a series 1, then it might be a little bit less pigment in it, so that won't be as strong. It's not difficult. I know it can be a little bit overwhelming, but it's just getting your mind around, am I buying a strong pigment? Is it in the cool or warm color family? That's all you need to ask if you're starting out. But majority of your process needs to be focused on purchasing materials or colors that are in the primary color family. That's red, blue, and yellow. Don't go getting variations thereof. And the joy for me when I paint, when I start a new painting, it really begins on the actual board. I don't focus any of my time what I put on there as much as what I mix. If I'm not happy with the colors that I mix on my palette board, I can assure you it does not go on that canvas. I hope I've given you a little bit more information, a little bit more nuggets to take back with you in your studio. On the next episode, I will go through the process of painting the actual still life. I might not give you as much in-depth information on the process, simply because I did it in this video, but I'll show you that process of painting the agapanthus from start to finish and what that looks like. Thank you for joining me. As always, you guys are absolute magic. I really do hope and have faith that these videos provide you with excitement, enthusiasm to begin something in your studio. And I hope that you've got the opportunity to equally paint, do, be, and create something that is authentic and unique to you. If you have any questions, as always, you are more than welcome to pop them down below. And I do read all the comments and I reply all myself. It's not a robot and it's not anybody else. It really is me. So feel free to ask any questions that you have going forward, or anything pertaining to particularly mixing colors. I'm more than happy to share as much information as I have gathered over the last 2 decades. Remember that this is your own journey, your own creative process. While you are in this world, I love you all. You are the light of the world. Do not let anyone dim your light. If they do, believe me when I tell you, they have something that's wrong within their own psyche and their own energy. Don't let that affect you. You are more important than you will ever know. Stay true to yourself, keep painting, keep expressing the authentic you. And until we meet again on the next creative episode. Bye, guys.